connected consumer.
Hi, my name is Angela, and I'm on the Parks Associates team for our Connected Consumer podcast. This podcast is all about Parks Associates' data-driven market insights on emerging consumer technology products and services, featuring our talented analyst team and industry leaders bringing new and innovative products to market. In this podcast, you'll get an inside look at the latest industry trends focused on the connected consumer, home automation and security, energy management, connected health and independent living, and digital content and video services. Today, we're going to be tuning into a webinar Parks Associates recently hosted with Ubiety to discuss the most pressing challenge for security system owners and local communities, false alarms, and how innovative AI solutions can solve those issues. Hope you enjoy!
Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. We have an amazing lineup of speakers from Ubiety, ADT, and Rapid Response for the webinar, AI Moving Security Forward, Solving False Alarms. We're going to be talking about the impact of the security industry and the impact of technology on the security industry. I'm going to start off with a brief introduction of some of Parks Associates' research, and then we will go straight into the conversation. This is such an important topic for the industry, and we're going to be taking questions throughout. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and I will incorporate them into the conversation. I want to send a big shout out to our sponsor, Ubiety, and thank them for bringing this conversation forward to the industry. My name is Elizabeth Parks, and I'm the president and CMO of Parks Associates. We are a market research and consulting company and have been studying the impact of computing on consumers and business lives since the late 1980s. Parks Associates research work has been at the forefront of leading service and technology companies' strategies for decades. We study and track the adoption of all emerging technologies and services for the consumer and the small to medium business market, which includes a whole home perspective. Everything from broadband to streaming services to home security and controls. The security industry is a sweet spot for us within our research work, and one of my favorite areas we cover, given the vast majority of security companies are small, second and third generation family-owned businesses, something I can truly relate to. I'm delighted to welcome our well-regarded and incredible leaders on our panel today. Keith Puckett from Ubiety, Morgan Hertel from Rapid Response Monitoring, and Don Young from ADT. We're going to dive deep into the transformational power of technology in the security space and the powerhouse plays happening across the security industry. Today, we are witnessing a remarkable transformation in the security industry driven by advanced technologies and systems integration. This transformation is fueled by data collection, the seamless integration of information, real-time reporting, predictive capabilities, and the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Our topics today include the role of technology in alarm prioritization, the new TMA AVSO1 standard, its implication for law enforcement, and how technology is shaping the future of the security and monitoring industry. We've recently released a white paper at Parks Associates in partnership with Ubiety. It addresses the issue of false alarms and helps introduce the TMA AVSO1 standard. The research sheds light on how technology will influence police operations and their response capabilities. I'd encourage you to download this research and delve into this valuable resource. Much of what we're discussing today is covered in the research work we did and a great reference point for the conversation. Monitored security is an enormous business opportunity and continues to grow. It's about protecting people's lives, their property, and the safety of our communities. Parks Associates research finds that by 2025, home security monitoring will generate $13 billion in annual revenues. That's over $1 billion per month. Consumers want to understand who and what is going around within their environments, and that speaks to all the contextual information that technology can provide. And you can see this data here highlighting the top 3 desired features for home security, with alerts at the top of the list and a slight increase over our 2021 data. When we look at the security market, Parks Associates research shows that adoption of all security solutions is currently at 41% of all US internet households, with 31% now having a security system and the remainder being a video device and no system. This data is from our ongoing research work of tens of thousands of internet households for decades tracking the market. And we also see the number of households with paid security monitoring at 25%. To provide context to these numbers, 1% of US internet households is about 1.2 million households. So that's 25% of paid security adoption is around 28 million or 30 million households with security services that they pay for. But the value of these security solutions is greatly threatened when systems detect and alert users to issues that really are not emergencies or security events. Consumers tell us repeatedly that false alarms are a problem, and we also know that these alerts and alarms are a result of user error in the home a lot of times. The ability for technology to be leveraged to help reduce false alarms is critical to the user experience. It is also critical for our first responders and the monitoring stations who are making the calls to understand what threats are happening. This is where we see the Monitoring Association has stepped up in developing and implementing a new standard called AVSO1, where alarms can be classified according to a system. There are so many things that we see standards do for industries, and this is part of what we're going to be talking about today in terms of growing the familiarity with the standard and how it can be implemented. So our panelists are going to share more about what AVSO1 is and what the core value is in assigning a score to an alarm with an automatic priority level. This information can be conveyed and help the call centers and the first responders with understanding the context of what's going on within that security event. We also see the adoption of the AVSO1 standard, and you can see here now that over 4 million cities with 4 million people populated have now embraced this standard and are using it. All of this is impacting individuals, businesses, neighborhoods, and our greater community. This is at the county level, the local level, the city, and the federal level. It is critical that we are leveraging all the technology available to help transform the industry, particularly as we continue to see shortages in labor. The information I'm sharing here is setting the stage for the conversation today. And I want to go ahead and kick off with some introductions from our amazing speakers. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I'd like each of you to share your name, the role of your company, the role of yourself for the business, the company you represent, and the market position that you have. Keith, we're going to start with you. And again, I want to thank you for bringing this topic to light and welcome you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Elizabeth. And I'll start by saying I'm humbled to be participating in the webinar with Morgan and Don and you. You guys are leaders and have embraced teaching me things that I don't know, which is really valuable. I am Keith Puckett, the co-founder and CEO of Ubiety. Prior to Ubiety, I spent about half my career on Wall Street doing large cap M&A for defense contractors, and I've been a serial entrepreneur and founder since.
Great, thank you for that introduction. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Ubiety and how everything got started with developing this technology?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is helpful, given that this is largely a security audience, to understand that Don and Morgan and you, Elizabeth, are very well known. I thought it would be valuable to express the origin story for why I founded Ubiety, to give some context. But you know, I mentioned being a banker and being a serial entrepreneur. It's true that I'm never the smartest person in the room, but I do get behind passionately solving a problem I understand. And Ubiety's really no different. I lived all my adult life in New York City and Chicago in high rises with doormen. And so I never thought about home security. But when I bought my first single family home in the city of Chicago, I realized like my front door was steps away from a busy city sidewalk. And I had a pretty visceral reaction realizing like, oh, wow, like, I think I need home security. I didn't know a lot of people that were going by. And so I went to a large home security company, and honestly, I bought everything that they had: indoor, outdoor cameras, motion, sound, glass breaks, all the monitoring, the mobile apps. And in that moment, I will share that like, true to form, I felt a sense of safety and security for my family when that alarm system was installed. I traveled a lot for work. I had 3 small children at the time. I have 5 now, and I really wanted that peace of mind. But fast forward a few months after having the system, I was traveling. It was late at night, and I got a call from the monitoring center that, I'm paraphrasing here, but it went something to the effect of like, Mr. Puckett, there's an active alarm at your home right now. And in that moment, if you've ever gotten that call, it's like, okay, are my children safe? Are there intruders in the home? Are they in danger? And the very next question the woman asked me is what inspired me to start on this journey in home security. She said, should we dispatch the police? And in that moment, I was like, I'm in New York, my house is in Chicago, I have no idea what's happening. And she offered that the door was open. And so like, I'm being a little bit dramatic, but like, it's like, okay, the door's open, the children let the dog out, or there's men with guns and they're gonna kill my family. Like, we're gonna treat that the same. And like, so I really wanted to understand and set out to build something where situational awareness and context would be available to me as a homeowner and also to the monitoring center. And so what we built at Ubiety is we built a sensor array and artificial intelligence engine that passively listens to RF signatures or radio frequencies coming off of devices. So what the world we see is we are passively listening to Wi-Fi, cellular, and Bluetooth, all with the express purpose of like ingesting that data and running it through our AI engine and our machine learning models to create insights about context. And so what that means is like, I know who normally should be in my home. The alarm's going off. There are other devices in my home that don't belong, right? Like, we sort of jokingly around here say like, devices don't walk around on their own. And so when you see an anomalous signal, it is really valuable. And also you can see a signal about something you do expect, so you can understand how you might be able to resolve that alarm. Just quickly, what we're doing in cellulars, we're able to hear the signal between a cell phone and a cell tower, and we extract the uniqueness out of that, and our AI engine can inform and infer the subscriber identity of the person who's carrying that device. So not only, I will be very candid, like, I wanted to catch bad people doing bad things, so the cellular side was always interesting. But smarter people than me came on board, and we've really evolved to get a lot of insights out of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as well. Could you go to the next slide, Elizabeth?
Sure.
So just like in sort of like to put a ribbon around what we're doing, all these devices are communicating all the time. Like right now I'm wearing a watch, I have a phone, I have AirPods in my pocket, iPads and laptops and all these devices, and they're constantly emitting radio frequency. We built a detection engine that allows us to ingest all of that data, and then we run it through our AI engine that we call Echoberg. And all that is just like gobbledygook to say, like, we built something that tells you what's going on, who's in your home, and how to understand why that's valuable to you. That could be like day-to-day value, meaning like, hey, the children are home from school, or the nanny is there at the time she should be, or the other service workers or grandma might have stopped by. You can get some interesting value day to day for the homeowner, but then also really able to like understand what's anomalous and how we can inform priority response when it comes to that. So that was a lot to share. So I'll stop there, but thank you.
That's great. And I know you're going to share a little bit more with us on this slide next. And so I'll bring that back up as we move into the conversation. Morgan, thank you for joining us. If you would go ahead and introduce yourself and Rapid Response and also your role at the Monitoring Association.
Sure. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate the intro. My name is Morgan Ertel, and I wear two hats, at least for another few months. My day job, the one that I get paid for, is Vice President of Technology and Innovation for Rapid Response. And that in a nutshell is me working on projects like this, but also where are we going with technology, in the future. Rapid has always been an organization that is planning and implementing 3 to 5 years out ahead of the rest of the pack. And so a big part of my job is plotting that course and understanding where we need to be. The stuff you're seeing today is work that we started 3.5 years ago, and so it's a long development cycle. The other hat that I wear is I'm currently the president of TMA, the Monitoring Association, which is the trade association for monitoring centers. We represent well over 80, almost 90% of all monitored accounts in the United States with our membership. So AVS-01 is very near and dear to me. I was one of the primary principals on the project, and it took us a little over 3 years to bring it from concept to implementation, but it's here now and is starting to get wide adoption both in the monitoring centers, but also in the law enforcement centers as they struggle to try and deal with their staffing issues.
Great, thank you for that introduction. We also have Don Young, EVP and Chief Operating Officer of ADT. It's always a pleasure having Don join us for anything. So Don, welcome. Go ahead and share us your role and some of the things you've been working on at ADT.
Sure, Elizabeth. I'm Don Young. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at ADT. What that means is basically I'm in charge of all of our field offices, our service, sales, and installation workforces, our call center environments, and actually the technology that we use inside the four walls of the company, which includes our monitoring platforms. Elizabeth, always a pleasure to participate in any event that you allow me to. Thank you very much for that. To Keith and Morgan, my esteemed colleagues here, glad to go ahead and have this conversation about AVS-01 and where it's going to take us. I've been doing this since 1988 when I got out of the Air Force after being a computer programmer for 4 years. Never left, never looked back. I've basically had mostly operational roles and technology roles, and more often than not, both of those combined. I really enjoy, it's in my DNA to try to optimize outcomes, and I've been frustrated at times trying to optimize only the operational side of an outcome versus the technology side. So to do both has always been a real joy for me. I'm excited about where we are now with this standard. As Morgan said, a handful of us really came up with this idea of prioritized response. Started out as basically a heresy kind of a thing and turned into a more evangelical kind of an outcome. But we'll get into that, I think, in a little while when we talk about the history. But otherwise, really proud to be part of ADT. What a journey it's been just in the last few years with our partnership with Google and the muscle that's brought us from a development standpoint. We'll talk about that in a little while. And then, of course, the most recent announcement, our partnership with State Farm. That's literally a 30+ year goal of mine in this industry, to go ahead and finally have a deep relationship, not just a periphery relationship, a deep relationship with an insurance provider, and just capitalize on the obvious narrative that we all know exists, which is reduce claims, save the customer money on their premium, have that money that's saved pay for the equipment to go ahead and prevent the damage to begin with. I mean, everyone wins in that scenario, and we're really excited about the way this partnership has gone so far. So thanks, Elizabeth, once again for allowing me to be part of this.
Well, of course, we appreciate you sharing your valuable time. Let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. We're going to start off and talk a little bit about technology, then we will talk about AVS-01, and the role of police, and really the future of the industry. So, but starting with technology, Keith, I want to start with you and see if you can share a little bit more about some of these technical aspects that we're talking about, and the different things that are having to come together, and what are these outcomes meaning, meaning to be. So if you could, you explained a little bit about the technology that you all are bringing to market, but can you share a little bit more about this presence detection and what the end user is really getting out of all of this? How is the engagement happening with the person who's getting notified, and what's that experience like?
Yeah, thank you. I share the origin story, one, because it's mine and I know it well. But when I think back to the slides that you shared, Elizabeth, about the state of the industry and where the demand is, the demand from a consumer level is valuable insights, right? And whatever form those take, so what we built is, we built a streaming data AI platform. And what does that mean? It's purpose built to consume high velocity RF data, because these devices are emitting signals all the time. So let me give you context on why that matters. In my home, we're an iPhone family. Anytime a device, let's say a Samsung Galaxy, a Google Pixel, a Motorola device, phone, walks into my home, I get an alert that that's anomalous. And our AI engine is learning the behavioral patterns of a home. So let's say there's someone that typically does come, maybe one of my children's friends that brings a Samsung device, and that person comes over between certain hours. I don't get an alert. It's not anomalous if it's expected. But we really want to create this fertile ground for data to be able to identify or associate people with presence. Today, we are using devices to do that. Like I said, we think people are, I've left my house without my wallet many times, but if I leave without my phone, I go back, right? I always have these devices with me. And so anything that's different is something to that our engine will tell us an alert on. I'm a Verizon family. If an AT&T or T-Mobile device walks into my house, I get an alert. That may not be something that requires an action, but it is information to me that matters, right? And so having children, this is, my children aren't of teenage years yet, but it also, we're doing things like counting the number of devices based on passive signals. So if it should be 5 devices for the children, but all of a sudden there's 30 devices in my house and I'm not home, I know that one of my kids is having a party or friends over. So we wanted to create something that wasn't just this alarming, you got to take action, this is bad, but start to serve the user or the homeowner something that they can get value out of. And our AI engine, we call Eckelberg, is really in the early innings of creating some pretty powerful insights. So we're excited about how AI can be deployed uniquely. I will just say that this is novel in compared to, people always ask me is this generative AI or chat GPT? Those are all awesome. I think those things have really powerful use cases. We built something that is novel, that is designed to ingest high velocity data and make in real time insights and inferences out of that.
That's great. Well, Morgan, maybe you can tell me, as a monitoring center, what's the impact of all this technology that's getting infused into these systems, and how complicated is it to make sense of all of this in terms of the communication factors?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, if you look at what we're faced with today compared to, even 3 or 4 years ago, it's daunting. And I think what we're seeing today is just a tip of the, proverbial iceberg and what we're going to be facing over the next 5. And so the challenge in the monitoring center is there's all these disparate data sources, all have good information. And, what do you do with it? Because at a monitoring center today, to the typical response has always been a very serial approach. Call this person, call the next person, send text messages to these people. And you did it over and over again. It was a rinse and repeat, just do the same thing no matter what was going on. You always just followed the same action plan, action pattern, whatever it happened to be, right? And you went through that. And so about 4 years ago, we started to look at this concept of what we call dynamic workflow. And the concept around dynamic workflow was really, really simple in terms of a concept, and that was to be able to ingest data from really any kind of source. And then based on that data, then start to vary your workflow and make different outcomes and make different decisions based on this data in real time. And so we built this engine and API set that we call dynamic workflow. And in the Ubiety example, it's really very cool because what we do is when an alarm condition occurs, we go and we dip into the Ubiety backend via API and we ask for a status about what's going on. And that status is going to tell us a bunch of things. It's going to tell us who's in the home right now. It's also going to tell us if people left, when did they leave? So here's a couple of examples that we do with this that really, if you think about it, are pretty simple, but you can really start to change the way you do things using these simple concepts. So in the Ubiety thing, let's say, for example, we have a call list that has 5 people on it or 3 people, whatever the number is, and we get an alarm condition. Instead of serially calling through the normal alarm list, we're going to call either the person that's on site right now, irregardless of where they live on the call list, or we're going to call the person that just left if nobody's there. And then when we talk to the person, we're going to have a completely different narrative. Our story is going to be different. We're going to be able to tell them who left, who's there, and really simplify the thing. If we can end the call in a single one-call scenario, we all win. Not only does the monitoring center win because we shortened up the time that we used to spend on that, but more importantly, the customer experience is very different. Instead of calling just down the same list, we call the person that likely just set the alarm off as they left, and boom, we're done and we're over with, and it just makes the most sense. But we can also extend that into other things. So another good example is, let's say, for example, your children are home and they've got some friends over and they're, playing games in the upstairs room, and we get a CO alarm. Now, as we all know, CO is colorless, odorless, and in many cases, you don't have a lot of time to get people out of the home. I can do the same thing. I can dip into this and find out who's in the home, and I can do a number of things with that. 1, I can call them if I need to. 2, I can text message all the people that are in the home. Everybody that's been set up as a profile, I can now text when they're in the home to say, get out of the home, but I can also tell the fire department how many people are in the home. That's incredible when I can tell the fire department we have at least 4 people in the home, and you need to go find them all. And this is a really, really good example, but there's many, many, many others is how we do dynamic workflow and how we can change what we typically do to reduce, the number of calls, the amount of time. We can clear false alarms much faster than we ever could. Completely different customer experience. We can provide better safety and security for the people in the home. The next thing is obviously being able to look in and tell a consumer, not only do we see who's left and who's there, but also who is there that's likely not supposed to be. And that'll be the next phase of this as we start to gather more data. So very simple idea, very simple concept, but changes the way everything works pretty quickly. That's how dynamic workflow works in a nutshell, Keith.
Well, and you're ending up taking all of this different information, which really is data, right? I mean, we're taking data and we are moving it into other form so that better communication can happen. Dawn, you all at ADT have done an incredible job of integrating innovative tech companies into all that you're doing with a grand vision, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about some of those challenges with technology, and then the impact that you all have when you're able to provide more context because of the different devices and the data that's getting captured as well.
Sure. Well, our first, I'd say, big investment from a technological standpoint into trying to do all the things that Morgan and Keith just talked about came with our acquisition of iView. Acquired Larry Folsom, just literally a genius when it comes to all things that technology is meant to do to streamline alarms and really reduce the amount of time it takes to respond to anomalous activity at the premise. Fortunately, and maybe a little coincidentally, the Google relationship started at almost exactly the same time, just a little bit afterwards. And what that really opened all of our minds up to is that data has many different origins. It's not just at the premise. It's not just with the devices that we've historically sold, for 100 years. It's data that the customer is willing to consent for us to be able to access in real time at the moment that event happens. So, for example, Keith and Morgan just talked about knowing who the owners of the cell phone devices are at the prem. Might be equally good to know whether the cell phone is in the driveway because they just left the house, or they're up the street because they're coming home. All that data is what Google really opened up our minds to, and then took us from ideation to reality. I mean, we're literally executing, and we built and wrote code and developed a platform we call Smart to actually leverage all of the data. The big thing, and it's an important word we should not forget when we get off this phone call, is consent. Because customers will not allow you access to any of that really critical data unless you have a consent mechanism that's really robust, one that guarantees protection of that data, locks it up forever if that's what the customer wants to do, but at the same time makes it available to first responders during a moment of crisis. And I'll tell you, it wasn't an easy journey, especially the first year working side by side with Google, trying to show them the virtues of the data that they were allowing us potentially to access, because they were understandably very vigilant about protecting that data. So 3 years later, we have a consent mechanism. We've even altered our contracts to go ahead and accommodate that consent mechanism, and now we have access to this robust data. So now what happens is leveraging, I'm not plugging it, but Vertex is the next kind of version of AI that Google is out there. I recommend everyone take a look at it. We've had the benefit of working with Google on it for quite some time. That's really our next leap forward to not only putting all the data together in the way that Morgan said in the dynamic response, but also making it more intelligent for the next time, training the models, a lot more effectively and more quickly, more cost effectively too, actually. And it really, just provides a window of opportunity for us to take these scores of 1, 2, 3, 4 and take them to a place. I think I saw on one of the key slides a second ago, like a numeric rating, maybe 1 to 100 or something, as far as severity. I think that's going to be the next phase of AVS-01. But we're really excited about it right now. We just wanted to make sure that we had the right tech in place to go in and live up to the opportunity.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about AVS-01 and how this came to be. Certainly, without some of this technology, we wouldn't have the information available to be able to do what AVS-01 is trying to do. Don, can you start us off with some of the history of how AVS-01 got started? And I know that Morgan has also played a great role in developing this initiative and really rolling it out. But what did that look like, a couple years ago when you guys got started on this, solving this problem?
It was more than a couple of years ago, and I love the opportunity to tell this story, as you know. So quite a while ago, a lot more than a few years ago, Morgan was part of the same conversation I was part of, where prioritizing response on alarm events was literally heresy. I meant that when I said that before. Nobody wanted it. Everyone thought it was a slippery slope to verified response, which nobody wanted, you know, even myself and Morgan. But we knew that eventually data was going to be, you know, more accessible. It was going to allow us to go in and give better situational awareness and assess anomalous behavior a lot more easily. And it just seemed inevitable that at some point, you know, the whole when in doubt, send the cops kind of a thing was going to expire. And fast forward to this moment that happened where TMA was still doing all the things that TMA was supposed to do, trying to go and live up to its constituencies' expectations on verified alarm response. Myself, Larry Folsom, Keith Gentoff, Steve Walker, you know, all of those folks kind of, I think, pillars in the industry. We all formed a new association called PPVAR, Partnership for Priority. At the time, it was Video Alarm Response. Now it's verified. But the concept was basically, no, we can't close down this narrative about prioritizing alarm response. We need to continue to talk about it, and preferably talk about it more openly. Most importantly, talk about it with law enforcement. Get their view of the world when it comes to prioritize alarm response. How do they think about that? What data would they say would demand a prioritized alarm versus a non-prioritized alarm? Most recently, matter of fact, I think Morgan would acknowledge one of the biggest contributors to the AVSO1 standard from law enforcement was Director David Hall, who was actually the immediate past president of PPVAR. He was instrumental. Can't say enough about that man and what he did to go in and facilitate this standard, because this standard is meaningless if only one side of the aisle adopts it. That's why I'm so excited to see that list of communities that have already adopted it. Here at ADT, I'm not sure about the rest of the industry, we are already passing these priority scores to San Diego, to Fresno. I mean, it's happening. It's real. I mean, this thing that was heresy and then evangelical has now become this real thing that we are doing, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm just so glad I stayed in the industry long enough to see this happening.
Well, yeah, that coverage of 4 million people who have, you know, responders who have this additional context, and really embracing the notification process. Morgan, can you tell us a little bit more about the overall familiarity? And actually, this is a perfect time for
Elizabeth, I have to interrupt you because I didn't get a chance to plug Morgan on this one. So I'm just going to finish it up, and I'm sorry if I put you off kilter there. I want everyone to know this because it's really important to me. When I was the president before, I'm immediate past president, I was president right before Morgan, and I kickstarted TMA's commitment to the AVSO1 standard. It was one of the 3 important things on my agenda. I wasn't able to get it across the finish line. Morgan had every opportunity to decide how to do that, you know, differently or not make it part of his agenda, and he made it priority 1 when he took over. And I'll always be eternally grateful for him doing that. And to his credit, I want everyone to know he got that thing to the finish line in the face of some decent resistance at times. And I just really applaud his effort for that. So sorry, Elizabeth, for interrupting, but I just wanted to make sure the audience heard that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really important that the audience understands that this is not an easy thing to do. And actually, any standard being developed and moved into the market is not easy, because you have to get all sorts of different people on board for it to work. And that is where that challenge may lie. So Morgan, before we go to you, let me put this poll out there though, and see if our audience, how familiar they are with AVSO1. So if we can launch that poll, and we'll leave that up on the screen. And so it's on the screen now, but Morgan, go ahead and share a little bit with us about where things stand right now, and the actual implementation, how police and communities are responding to this idea of this new standard.
Sure. Let me go back in time just a tiny bit, because this is important to the context as well. One of the amazing things about doing this AVSO1 project is that when we teed this up And just like any other ANSI, standard, the floor was open to anybody that wanted to participate. And when we started the standard, there was over 60 people that were committed to working on this project. A large chunk was from law enforcement and public safety. And we could not have gotten this standard done without this public-private partnership and getting law enforcement and public safety involved. Getting their insight was crucial to the success of this, and David Hall led that challenge to make sure that his people that on the law enforcement and public safety side continued to stay engaged. So a lot of gratitude goes in that direction. But we also had representation from end users. We had representation from organizations, the other trade associations. We had reps from monitoring centers, installation companies, and equipment manufacturers. And with that many people, it's a little bit like herding cats to get this all done. But one of the things that we started out with AVS-01 is we all had these assumptions. We all thought that we knew what we were gonna, what would make the difference between a real alarm and a false alarm. And there was a lot of discussion early on. And one of the things we made a decision to do was to put our thoughts and our opinions aside, and let's go get some real data. So we set out to go get real data and to try and normalize that data into something we could work on. And depending on how you look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, one of the things it did was it dispelled a lot of our beliefs and a lot of our assumptions and a lot of our anecdotal data. And so when AVS-01 was put together, it was truly based around data that was gleaned from literally thousands of actual alarms that we went back and researched and looked at. And so the initial outcome of this is based on data, not supposition or opinion or anything else. It was solely based around that. It was also based around that this is iteration number one. And we fully believe that this will continue to grow and morph and change. And like Don said, there'll be a numbering system. That was one of our goals initially. And we put that aside for now because it was too complicated for law enforcement and monitoring centers to try and work through numeric scale. And so we came up with a very simple concept, which was, the 5 priorities. That's out there today. Rapid has been sending the priorities through ASAP to PSAP now for a little over a month. So that's been going on along with the relevant and supporting data, which is a requirement. And we start this month on voice calls. I know ADT's already been working on the voice call side, and we'll catch up on the ASAP side. But you got 2 pretty good sized players already handing out these priorities, and so it's generating questions, it's generating a lot of thought and a lot of new inquiries into how this works. We saw a handful of them that have already implemented that. That's awesome. They've started that, but we're dealing with law enforcement that just flat is out of staff. They don't have staff in the call centers and the PSAPs to take calls, nor do they have boots on the ground to try and respond to these. And so being able to give law enforcement some tools to be able to prioritize what they're doing is incredible. And it's based on real data. And each organization that's out there today can decide how they want to deal with these different response types so that they can optimize their boots on the ground.
Yeah, certainly. And I had a few slides in there that somehow didn't show up in regards to 911 call times and the real problem that we're having across all the different cities in the United States with labor and just getting to people when they need help. Interesting, our poll results show us out of the majority of everybody who voted, 33% being very familiar with AVS-01, 28% being somewhat familiar, and 39% being not at all familiar. So, there's some work that we need to do in the industry on the technology side, as well as the education side, and making sure that people understand what the future of security looks like and the necessity of having a standard like this in place, and really the impact overall that it can have. Keith, going back to you, all the technology that you are working hard and getting out there is a piece of what is going to help provide that additional context. And certainly, Don, the various things that ADT is doing with incorporating all sorts of different sensors, and we've got video analytics, video data, video verification. Keith, how would you describe the integration of technology with the security industry? Has this been an easy thing to do? Is it? You tell us a little bit about how that's been for you.
Sure. I want to put a exclamation point on what Don and Morgan just said. They have forgotten more about the security industry than I've ever known, and I want to highlight this point. Like, Ubiety is a new member of TMA. Whether I'm talking to Don, whether I'm talking to Morgan, whether I'm talking to Larry, everyone embraces technology and change. So the human beings in this industry really do deeply care about making a difference. Like, the way they just described it, I would summarize as like, imagine what we can accomplish if people don't care who gets the credit. That's who the industry's made up of. I never run across people who are like, oh, that's not like, our idea, so we don't like it. Like, people really learn, and I just want to express some gratitude that everyone is willing to teach me things I don't know. So thank you. As a new member of TMA, they do a really good job of ingratiating people into the flow and welcoming new ideas. If you wanted to go back to that slide that you had where it's like, I think it's the slide Don mentioned where there's a little scoring, like, we see AVS-01 as a catalyst for really significant change that helps law enforcement, like change that helps the homeowner with information, change that helps the monitoring centers be efficient and higher efficacy. Like, it's an awesome opportunity. So I'm just grateful to be part of it. I will say that, like, what we are doing is not the only solution. We just happen to be really fond of it. Like, we're doing something that in automation at scale, we believe can get you a level 2 in AVS-01. And like, a level 2 is critical to start to get a prioritized response. Like, as a newer entrant into the market, I had to really get caught up to speed on like how all this works. And what I discovered is like, law enforcement has been like a really good partner and resource for the security industry to deliver the last mile of the solution. And because that challenge of like not having good context or perhaps like false alarms has sort of like degraded or diluted that over time, like, we have an opportunity to really give some good information. I think like there's been a lot of energy put towards cameras. I think video cameras are an awesome technology. I think homeowners love them. And like, we see what we're doing as an augment to like, hey, there's motion on a camera and we're detecting a device that hasn't been seen. That's a really interesting way to score something, right? It's like, as Morgan mentioned, like in the flat version that will get better over time as the data flywheel goes, like in the flat version, we can tell you if someone's on site in real time. Like, Morgan will tell you, like, we've cut down time to close by 75%. That's the number that I'm allowed to say. Like, I think it could even go higher. Like, what that means is like, we can dynamically call the person on site, close an alarm within 30 seconds of the alarm going off. No buffer, no time. And like, having that confidence, you start to build the confidence of the homeowner. And then when you start serving them additional information and start serving law enforcement different information, you're building trust, really. You're building trust in the ecosystem. So I'm excited about it. I'm grateful also that the men on this call, Morgan and Don, did all the hard work so that a guy like me that's not as smart can come in and like try to be useful, because like it was a big heavy lift to get this thing into a position where people are adopting it. So great job to them.
Well, and I love that you brought the word trust, up, and peace of mind, of course, but really this is trust, and people, individuals in their homes or a business is trusting the security provider with their safety, with their families, with their children, with their, most precious assets. And so there's an obligation for the security industry to advance its capabilities and evolve as the world is changing. And of course, consumers expect it, right? Uber has changed the way people operate, just in the sense that, we all expect things to be able to happen, just like I can order the Uber and it shows up outside. I don't even know who it is, and I'm going to get into the car with that person and drive off. So it's amazing what technology can do, and really how that is going to be impacting us, not just now, but in the very, very near and long-term future. I've got a couple questions. I want to go ahead and make sure I get these in. So let me ask real quick to Morgan. Does the dealer design those dynamic workflows with the customer, or does the dealer opt in for Ubiety and into some prescribed dynamic workflow?
Both. It just depends on the setting and the use case and the needs. It can be done either way or both.
Okay, great. And how exactly is the data integrated into the emergency response on their devices? Anybody have an answer for that?
That's a great. Sorry, go ahead, Don.
Oh, I was just wondering. I'm looking for specificity. My guess is you two are as well. Is it a question about a consumer's device?
It's not specific to that. It just says, how exactly is the data integrated into the emergency response on their devices?
I could take a quick crack, and then Don and Morgan, please. Like, in the case of integration with a monitoring center, the data API opens up only in the instance of an alarm event, and that's when a monitoring center can do a call. And in the context of, I'll just use Rapid because we can talk about that publicly, they have tethered our data into Rapid SMS. So when an alarm is going off, the homeowner's getting a text that says, there's an alarm going off, it appears no one's home, or these are the 4 people home, so that the homeowner's getting that data. And then on the flip side, the monitoring center is dynamically deciding who to call to resolve it based on the data that they're seeing. So we're exposing it in a short window, and then that window closes. So then Rapid doesn't keep that data. It's just available during the alarm event. Do I got that right, Morgan?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we don't really want to get into the privacy issues of knowing when people are coming and going. So our world lasts for a few seconds. We grab what's currently happening, and then we move on from that. But we can, and one of the things I want to add is that, there's a lot of other kind of data that lives out there that can make these dynamic workflow changes. So one of the simple ones, weather. You get 4 glass breaks trip at the same time. We can do a dip into a weather API and realize that there's thunder right on top of the house or the business. We can make decisions based on all kinds of other data. It's not necessarily just data about the premise as well. So lots of different ways to utilize and leverage this stuff.
Yeah, and I have some more questions about data and devices. So let me see if I can continue and pepper you all with a few questions. When dealing with device signals to detect presence, what about the neighbor's devices? And so Keith, I think this might be to you over how you would handle a neighbor.
Could you repeat the question, Elizabeth?
So when dealing with device signals to detect presence, what about the neighbor's nearby devices? Is that something that's programmed?
No, that's a fantastic question. So our AI engine has built filter cutoffs to understand the home. So like, I should have mentioned, I didn't earlier, like we originally thought we were going to build sensors and sell them direct to consumers. What we built now is a software package we call an edge daemon that rides on routers and security panels. So that software package sits there, it does the detection. The full detection takes about like 1 week, 7 to 10 days to settle. And then all of that becomes ambient. And we understand like the signal strength and where that signal's coming from is not part of the home. So we cut it off and edge it out, right? So we're really building, and that's where like the data over time gets really sophisticated. Early, it can get a little, I'll call it choppy, I'll call it like in the first 2 weeks, but it gets really, really pointed. And we recognize what is ambient and outside versus inside.
Okay, great. We have another question about what kind of training is happening for public safety to understand this new technology, the AVS-01 standard. Are you all have any knowledge on training for those first responders?
I can take it or Don can take it, either one.
I think we both can, Morgan. Why don't you take it from the TMA vantage point? I'll take it from our direct work with the PSAPs.
That sounds good. So there's a couple pieces that are occurring. TMA is producing a number of videos that would be appropriate for not only Central Station staff, but also dealers and their staff. Those videos are self-paced and will be able to be watched 24/7. Those are in production now, and they will be out as soon as we can wrap up the video. PPPAR is working on the same thing for law enforcement and for telecommunicators. There's also a project that's in play now that's working with the IACP, the International Chiefs of Police, to also push that same training module into their standardized training that goes out to law enforcement officers, so they have a clear understanding about what that is and will be part of their normal academy training. Don, you can go ahead and add to that if you'd like.
Yeah, not much more to add to that other than when it comes to the actual practical implementation of providing them the scoring, either verbally or, as Morgan mentioned before, ASAP to PSAP, or in our case, Intrado as well. We work with them to go in and learn what they're willing or able to consume from us, and then we just accommodate them, depending on what stage they're ready to accept. In the case of Fresno and San Diego, they're accepting it verbally. They have desires to go ahead and have it electronically done, but we're just going to go ahead and cater them on what they're ready to do. Good news is we're able to accommodate either or.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm looking through a bunch of questions here. Is there a standard protocol for feeding the alarm central station with presence data?
I would not say it's standardized. We have the ability at Rapid to ingest anything. That's the way we built our API set. So if you designed an API that allows us to go get status, then we can go grab that and manipulate it as such. Every one of these platforms is going to be a little bit different, so trying to standardize it is going to be pretty tough. But I think it's going to be a matter of every either automation platform doing the work or every monitoring center doing the work to be able to go get that data, because it's all different. What weather data is very different than data from, say, a thermostat that's different from Ubiety, which is different from some other home automation platform. So there is no standard way that I'm aware of. Every one of them's a one-off, but the idea behind it is to normalize that into workflow.
Okay, great. Here's another question about if you all see any interest in data, the presence verification data being used in a non-alarm situation for general awareness, perhaps. And so that's a question.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a quick yes and yes. We have lots of interest in our data. We have home insurance partners who are interested to understand risk mitigation strategies around, like, there's simple things like in a flood or a water leak, if you knew who was home, could you reach out to that person directly in an emergency so they could shut the water off? Or telematics, like, a simple rule of thumb. By the way, I'm not an insurance expert, but I do play one during the day. If a home is sits empty for 90 days, it's like 10x more likely to have a fire or flood event. And so, like, risk mitigation understanding is, I think, really fascinating, along with just like smart home, going from this like smart butler where you prompt something to do things, but you transition to this idea of like ambient, like just my mere presence causes things in the home to behave a certain way, temperatures and entertainment and things like that. So, like, I think there's lots of presence opportunities that we've been exposed to in a very short time.
If it helps, I can absolutely confirm that, Elizabeth. Yeah, detecting presence in the home, however you decide to do it, massively important to the insurance industry.
Yeah, and you can imagine all the reasons why, in terms of that information and having it available for what's going on. We're about to publish a study. I have to plug our research. We're about to publish a new study on insurance in the smart home. So we've been definitely looking at a lot of the implications there for these different devices and the home insurance play. Okay, there's quite a few questions in here. Can Ubiety detection of cell phone presence confirm if they are in the home, a protected premise, versus standing outside of the home? Keith,
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really is related to the flywheel of the data, like what is normal for the home. So, like, for example, like at my home, like I can tell when a Tesla pulls into my driveway. I don't drive a Tesla, so that's valuable to me. But like, we're hearing things outside the home, and we're distilling them down into whether or not it's an alert to serve. But around cell phones, like, we have pretty tight measures around cell phones. It is not perfect yet until like the home has lots of behavior in it, right? So like when you have a home like mine that has 7 mobile phones constantly emitting, it knows what normal looks like in the home versus, the FedEx guy or the Amazon delivery person who also is like right outside my door. So we hear both, and we're letting the user, the homeowner, we call this feature "Tell Me When." They can arm their system with Ubiety to tell them when things unexpected happen. And we're really focused on making sure that we can do exactly that, which is like inside the home versus on the front porch, right? So it's a great question. And all the challenges that we've been trying to overcome, those things will never go away. We're always working to improve the AI engine that gives us these insights. But fantastic question.
Okay, great. We're close to time, but I've got one more interesting question that I think is perfect to end on. The question is, any data whether or not the customers that have received the value of verified alarms are churning at a lower rate? And so the idea of a customer switching or sticking with a service because of that satisfaction and experience that they're getting as a result of this added technology. I know I could talk a little bit about that, but Dawn, is there anything you'd like to say about the stickiness that comes with these kinds of technologies that are able to provide more context and information to the end user?
Yeah, Elizabeth, listen, stickiness in the most simplest form equates to value. And you've got to be able to go ahead and demonstrate how verified alarms provides them value. The way you do that, just show them the AVS-01 standard. And here in your municipality, ma'am or sir, these are how your alarms are going to be responded to with or without verification. And if you're able to go and show the customer the value of that, the value of a faster response, the fact that if, I think I saw a statistic out there somewhere that 10,000 lives would be saved per year if we can improve the response time by just 1 minute. 10,000 lives. Somebody on the call or your audience look that up. But if you're able to tell the customer that, then yeah, I think that's a win every time.
Morgan, you have any comments on the satisfaction of that user experience and how technology is playing a bigger role?
Sure. In our beta testing with a lot of consumers, being able to get those calls and being able to have some data when you have that call has really been scored high on when we ask and query people. I'll go back to Keith's example, and if you've ever had an alarm go off in your home, it's always the same as, Mr. Tell, the alarm's going off. What would you like us to do? And about that time, panic sets in, and you're just completely bewildered as to how to answer that because you don't have any other data yet. You're busy fumbling for phones, trying to figure out, can I look at my video, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But imagine the call of Mr. Tell, the alarm's going off, but I see your daughter, Kristen, just got there 2 minutes ago. But we called and she didn't answer. That's a very different conversation, right? And so we firmly believe, and I think it's a little early to know what the churn rates are going to look like. We firmly believe that just based on our surveys, that is going to change that stickiness. It's going to change that consumer satisfaction and NPS scores and everything that goes along with that. And by the way, AVS-01 today is squarely aimed at the intrusion world, but it has applications in all the other sides too, medical, fire, those kinds of things, being able to get a baseline response, but an enhanced response based on, other conditions. In the health world, you've got, simple things like heart rate, pulse ox, respiratory rates. In the fire world, you have things like CO detection and temperature and other kinds of things that are, part of fires. We believe that eventually this is going to span all aspects of our industry in order to be able to have smart responses about things that are more significant than things that are less significant.
Well, and when we were talking in our prep calls, you all mentioned this idea of the future where this scoring could really, really take on a whole new life as it is adopted. So Dawn, if you were to say what could be the best thing you could hear about AVS-01 in 5 or 10 years out, what would that be?
5 or 10 years out, I would hope and expect that we would see all the data necessary to prove that these percentages that we would come up with in the future are reliable percentages. They reflect accurate reasons for wanting to change the way that first responders respond to alarms. So I don't think there's a way to stop that train from getting there in 5 to 10 years. Now you just have to decide whether you want to climb on board or otherwise.
And I think if you don't get on board, you're going to be in bad shape.
Yeah, Morgan, I was just going to go to you on that. Is it upon the security players to embrace this standard?
Absolutely. I mean, when you have big organizations that are clearly adopting this, ADT being one of them, but there's others as well. Don't kid yourself, both on the installation side, installed professional, but also on the DIY side, they are absolutely, gearing up and ready for war on this platform. And it's what this is going to do is a couple of things. It's really going to start to create some opportunities for a lot of installation and sales organizations. You now have something else besides everything else you've only had to sell before. You now have some real things that you can tangibly sell and provide, and that'll create a lot of opportunity for a lot of not only the sales and installation people, but also the manufacturing side. And at the same time, we're going to be providing really solid data to law enforcement to help them out, and we're going to generate a much better customer experience. It's really a win. And there are so many technologies. I saw a couple of questions in there about LiDAR and things like that. Yeah, anything is open for use on this when it comes to technology. So LiDAR, radar, millimeter wave this, Wi-Fi. We're going to see a whole plethora of things that are going to start to come out that have to do with more additional data about what's going on at the site and in and around the site. So it's just a matter of time. But if you're out there wondering if you should be paying attention to this, you should absolutely figure this out. Work with your monitoring centers, try and figure out where you're at. Start to look at some of the technologies. There'll be a lot of announcements on the Ubiety side, I'm sure, as to what that starts to look like. But there are others out there as well that you need to pay attention to and start to understand its implications and its rewards. Because if you don't, you're going to get run over by the big train.
No doubt, data sources, data origins are force multipliers for trying to identify anomalous activity more accurately, and then of course change the response.
We can't just keep doing what we've been doing for the last 100 years. We're time for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Keith, I'd love for you to have the last word in terms of where you see the future of security going, and as it relates to these emerging technologies.
Yeah, I would just say thank you to everyone that has participated. I personally have also learned a lot today from Morgan and Don and you, Elizabeth. I bring it back to like the human level. I'm only here because I had a frustrating experience as a home security customer, right? Like, I just see it as such an awesome opportunity to, really do well here by the homeowner, and all the other things will take care of themselves. Like, I know that companies are working on fantastic solutions. Like, we are excited to be a contributor to that. And, I really want to say thank you to everyone, because you've welcomed me and Ubiety into this family or ecosystem of companies that do really truly care, and we just want to be part of that. Like, we use a phrase inside the company, like, things that matter are hard. This matters, and evidenced by what Don and Morgan shared, it's been hard, but we're like right there. So like this should be the fun part, where people get to experience new things and see how we can unlock some value for everyone in the ecosystem. So again, I'm just grateful to be part of it. And Elizabeth, thank you to you and Ashton and your team at Parks. Like, you guys really do lead the way, and you've taught me so much about things that I was not an expert in, your research, and again, just very grateful to be here.
Well, thank you, Keith, for those kind words. And I really want to send a shout out to Ubiety for bringing this topic forward. It's so important to help educate the industry, and I think that's the thing that probably needs to happen right now, is really being able to educate the industry on these new technologies that are being incorporated. And so I want to thank you all for joining us and spending your valuable time. I also want to remind our audience that there is this white paper if you'd like to read. It's you can scan the QR code. There's a link in the chat. It's also available on the Parks Associates website. Thank you again to Ubiety. And Parks Associates is truly dedicated to helping provide the most reliable and accurate research in the areas we cover. And we do this in so many different ways. If you'd like to be involved in any of our events, read our research, engage with us, we are ready to talk to you. So feel free to reach out to me directly or any of our team. And again, thank you for your time and for being here.
Connected consumers. If you're listening in on a podcast platform, please make sure to subscribe and submit a review. For those watching us on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button and feel free to comment about what topics you're interested in. See you next time.